Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our community, plus a live Q&A that you can't find anywhere else. It's November 1st, 2023. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator for startups that helps teams who are overwhelmed with AWS. We do this by using our library of over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 10 million times. No matter where you find yourself on this journey, we're here to help your startup launch better products faster, free up your bandwidth for innovation, and nail your value delivery every time. And if you or your team has been banging your head against the wall with underperforming infrastructure, just head over to cloudposse.com/quiz, answer a few quick questions, and we'll chart a roadmap for success free. Worst case, you get a clear roadmap for shoring up your infrastructure. Best case, we co-build it with you, empower your DevOps team in 90 days or less. Now, how can you maximize today's session? First off, our format is very informal. Engage as much as you'd like. Ask questions, and if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. For those on the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. Join us live by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Again, cloudposse.com/officehours. Now, I have one ask. If you find any portion of today's office hours valuable, share it with your team. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse to find the video, or maybe share a short testimonial about the value you're getting. Do that by joining our Slack team and posting something in the Office Hours channel. Remember, we're not simply creating content here. We are trying to build a community of helpful people. So with that, let's get started and go into our announcements. All right. First one is some pretty serious vulnerabilities were uncovered in the NGINX Ingress controller for Kubernetes. This used to be like the de facto Ingress controller. These days, if you're on AWS, you're probably using something else. But this doesn't sound very good. An annotation injection causes arbitrary command execution and other code injection possibilities via permanent redirection. So make sure you upgrade your Ingress controller. Another one here, this one struck close to heart. Thank you, Masterpoint and Matt Gowie, for putting this post together. This is a very long, very thorough post on a Cloud Posse Terraform module that is integral to our whole solution for Terraform. The module in question is called terraform-null-label, and it's what we use to generate consistent resource names in AWS or on whatever cloud we use with Terraform. One of the most common problems you'll notice with open source or in-house homegrown Terraform code is a large inconsistency in how resources are provisioned. You'll see something that will say like prod VPC, or VPC dash prod all capital -2. And other times something, most of the time those resource names are missing sufficient information to disambiguate them from other resources, or doing so in an inconsistent way. They prevent you sometimes from deploying a Terraform module multiple times in the same AWS account or within the same project. You end up with normalization errors. So some things are capitalized, some things are underscore, some things are hyphenated, etc. And I don't know, it just gets me on the OCD thing. So I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, we were bothered by this and we wanted to put a stop to it. We wanted to make sure that our Cloud Posse modules could be deployed any number of times within the same account context, and that we could do those changes to how resources names are formatted just using feature flags or module inputs rather than changing the underlying module itself. So this is really powerful because you can change the way your resource names look based on your preferences just using a Terraform module. The other thing that the null label module and this is the module in question here does, which is really nice, is it introduces this concept of a context. And we use this context similar to how in earlier versions of JavaScript, you used to pass the context along to function calls, similar to how in Perl, you would pass an object around as the first argument to function calls. And that's how object-oriented programming was kind of emulated in Perl. Well, obviously you're limited in Terraform. You can't replicate exactly all that, but we are using the context variable, the context in a similar way in Terraform. So by embedding the context, this module, this code, this what we call a mixin into all of our modules, we can very efficiently inherit settings and come up with as many labels as we need. And we can pass that context to other modules and so forth. So an example of that would maybe be, I think our subnet module is one of the good ones. So first we import the mixin for the context definition. This is literally copied verbatim into every one of our modules. And this ensures that we have a common interface for all of our modules, common set of parameters. And then when we define some kind of an instance, we'll call the module, we'll call the label module, and we'll pass it in our current context and then add any other metadata we have or override any of the attributes we need to override. And then we get a new label. So it takes the thought process out entirely of creating resource names wherever you're deploying this. And this is not AWS specific. This will work on whether using like Akamai, Azure, GCP, Kubernetes, AWS, etc. If you call other modules, those modules can use that same pattern as well. So everything you provision has a consistent naming convention. And good luck getting that from most other Terraform modules out there. Any questions on null label?
I had one quick question, just dropped it in the chat. Is there any logic in the module for name length limitations?
Yes, actually, we do have parameters for that with the null label. Off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly what those are, but we do support that. And I believe we support different ways of truncating it so that it can truncate it, but also add like a short checksum at the end or small hash at the end. So you still get a unique name, but that is truncated.
One quick question. The incorporation of, say, namespacing in tag names, this would be theoretically where this would be handled.
So one of the things that null label does that I didn't really touch on, I think the post goes into it,
Okay,
the one
sorry.
here by Mac Dowie, is also managing your tags. Oops. Is also managing your tags. So first of all, we have the concept of a namespace built into the module, but then that's also exported as a tag map. So you can pass that to your resources so they get a list of appropriate tags. So there's a few things that have come out most recently in Terraform. One is like default tags or something. And then there's other people who've come out with tools. I forget the company that came out with a tool that helps you inject tags into all your Terraform code. Both of those, to me, are anti-patterns and symptomatic of not doing your Terraform code the right way from the beginning. And sure, those are great if you inherited a pile of Terraform code and you don't want to touch that. I get it. I wouldn't want to do that either. But if you're starting from scratch, you should just be generating proper labels and tags by convention, and you do that using terraform-null-label. So with terraform-null-label, you can establish all the tags you want on your infrastructure, and you can pass those in the context. So every other module that you invoke also sets its tags. So everything is appropriately tagged based on the context that's deployed. Right now, our null label has some opinionated labels. It's on our roadmap to get that fixed, so that you can define your context that makes sense for your organization. Because what's made sense for Cloud Posse, you know, for 5 years or whatever plus, might not jive with how you think of it, and that's fine. We want to make it so that our opinionated labels don't intrude. No ETA yet on that, but that is forthcoming for null-label. Let's see in the chat here.
I think it's worth mentioning that y'all did a good job with that and making it not opinionated. Like, it's very customizable.
Yeah.
The thing that is opinionated is the names of those label ID elements.
Right.
And that's what rubs people the wrong way, I think. But like,
Yeah.
just get over it. You know, it's
Especially these two. These are the most
yeah,
there.
people don't like that, but you know,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
This is a very customizable thing. That's why I've always loved it. And, you know, we were happy to write the blog post because just getting the word out that this is like how you should, you know, name and tag things in Terraform. Because it's sad to see, you know, the random module that you pick up from another organization outside of Cloud Posse and they have no consistency, and it's pervasive across everything, and y'all have solved it. So anyway, that's why we did it. Kudos to you folks for solving hard problems a long time ago.
I appreciate it. All right. Yeah, like, so in terms of customization, other things, like you can customize the order in which we concatenate them. So the label order. So if you don't like our default, you can change that. And then you can set that as a global in your modules, and then everything else just inherits that from then on. You can customize how things are, you know, that you force them to be lowercase, you force them to be title case or uppercase altogether. So depending on what you're trying to do, sometimes you might want all uppercase variable names. If you omit any of them, if you omit any of the parameters, they're just squashed. They're just ignored. So they're not required. You don't have to use namespace if namespace doesn't make sense for you. All right. So yeah, thanks, Matt Gowie, for that shout out. If anybody's looking for awesome Terraform consultants, hit up Matt Gowie. All right. So next one here is something that Mr. Jenkins shared. I don't know if it was 6 months ago or a year ago, a controversial post came out about how overpriced cloud was. I don't know how universally well received that was. I know there was a lot of valid criticisms about it. Well, David's doubling down on that. And dollar for dollar, as a business owner, I can totally see where he's coming from, that this made total financial sense. I do think it's still a fair oversimplification of the value you're getting from a managed cloud. But hey, dollars are dollars. And if you need to cut costs, then maybe this is a consideration. So he breaks down, for example, how much they were spending for OpenSearch on AWS for at $43,000 a month. And now their fully amortized cost, you know, with depreciation would be about $2,500 a month. So that's a sharp premium.
I think I said this when the original article came out, but I'm going to say it again, that there is no way that they're running this, that like he's actually looking at, if you read it right there, power, space, networking to operate these machines.
Yeah.
But what about the entire team that they need to run this infrastructure 24/7, 365, and you know, do all this other stuff, right? And also,
totally unfair,
where's the
comparison.
amortized hardware cost in there? That's not taken into account either. So they're basically like, you know, fudging the numbers to make it look a lot better than it really is. I think at the end of the day, they're going to see that they're not saving nearly as much as they think they're saving.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much more that goes into it.
They even
Insurance,
their
training.
own deployment mechanism, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It's like their alternative to Kubernetes that's supposed to be on-prem bare metal friendly and like local laptop. Actually, I take that last comment back. I'm not sure about that, but it's supposed to be their Kubernetes alternative. So they've spent a decent amount, not just on migrating to bare metal on-prem, but they've also essentially built software to do that, which I imagine has its own costs.
Yeah, and then they claim, if you read in the paragraph, like I think, yeah, two paragraphs down from where you're highlighted, they're basically saying that they haven't hired anyone. They fully moved off of the cloud and haven't hired anyone. And I call complete bull on that one. So I just don't see how it would be possible that they could run a physical infrastructure the size of what would be required to run Basecamp and Hay 24/7 without a dedicated staff to do that. Like if that's not the case, then they completely are burning out their team, or they're being less productive in writing software or something. I mean, they're squeezing a balloon at some point. Like, so it's kind of a BS like comparison in my opinion.
And they're also running Rails for sure for both of those applications. So and this is hey, for better or worse, like Rails is a monolith, and it's easy to probably just scale the hell out of it. But they're not dealing with a complex application architecture. Like you couldn't be DoorDash and run, have a really event-based, like microservice-based architecture that, works at scale and do something like this and think, oh, this is going to be so much cheaper. I think that, yeah, I agree with you, Matt, but I also think that this is very specific to like the tech stack that they've chosen, which works kind of probably well or better than a lot of other tech stacks. And is a good thing for Rails, which they're behind, but it also is, not what everybody's on. And there's that to account for as well.
Yeah.
I would also be really interested to see how they're doing capacity planning, staying ahead of their customers, unless their business is just completely like withered at this point, which may be the case, and stagnant and that kind of thing. But I just don't understand how they can be planning it that easily, like to do that kind of thing. So I don't know.
So one thing that I don't know if it's in this article, but my understanding is they haven't done the storage migration yet. That's still on S3. So I think they were supposed to follow up on their storage solution, or maybe that's it right there.
Yeah. It also seems like they're able to leverage remote hands to do some of the physical stuff. I don't know to what extent that is.
Yeah, where's the bill for that?
Oh, so Kamal is the thing they wrote.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. No, okay, here. Tests updated, some things. Okay. Anything else to add to this?
Has anyone here used Kamal yet?
Yeah, even like kick the tires or just played with it.
I'm curious what their load balancer strategy is, because cloud load balancers and target groups, things like this enable that kind of flexibility that you get with dynamic workloads or dynamic clusters.
Mhm.
Is there an equivalent to this for Kamal or for
Traffic, which is a pretty powerful load balancer, very programmable, nice APIs.
That's my kid. Go back.
Your kid doesn't believe it either.
All right. Next announcement was looks like the serverless framework is kind of going the ways of like what Docker has done, requiring a license for companies with more than 2 million in annual revenue. Serverless used to come up all the time, and I used to hear good things. These days, I hear very little about serverless. I hear more about it's probably my echo chamber being on Amazon, companies using SAM instead.
Yeah, I think the SAM first class support for basically building anything you want in CloudFormation in SAM templates, and the experience that they've added to that has made SAM a much more viable solution than it used to be. And I think that I think that the people have just started to say, well, if Amazon's supporting it out of the box, why don't we just adopt it? And I think a lot of the things that used to be like plugins and serverless are now available kind of natively as like first class support in SAM. So I think that like a lot of those plugins, which used to be the main like argument why you would use serverless, aren't as relevant anymore.
When I saw this one, same thing I thought was the variable pricing and self-reporting would make it difficult for serverless to actually get people to pay for it. And if it came to the point of paying for it, like you were saying, Matt, people will say, well, let's just drop serverless and go to SAM. So it could be a slippery slope either way.
Yeah. Oh, and Craig Califf brought up a good point. This is taking a step back to the previous thing we were talking about with going to bare metal or on-prem, how Oxide Computer is building a business on the premise that there'll be more orgs who want or can do this. I think it's a little bit more nuanced. I think that's true, but I think it's also a little bit more nuanced than this. Also, I mean, bare metal is not going away. And for the companies who are doing that, can't they get a better experience as well? In addition to people who are fed up with cloud and going back to bare metal. I'm guessing people going back to bare metal will have higher expectations of a cloud-like experience, and then I could totally see Oxide capturing their business easier. All right, next announcement. It's a minor announcement. If you're on our Slack team, sweetops, we added an opentofu channel. We haven't yet added the release note or the release feeds for opentofu there. But in order to foster communication around adopting, moving to, or using opentofu, we started that channel. More to come. Lastly, 1.6.3 of Terraform, HashiCorp Terraform just dropped, added a minor tweak to skip S3 checksums. And if I recall correctly, I think this is also beneficial if you are doing HA S3 and DynamoDB, global DynamoDB tables for to replicate your Terraform state. The checksums include the bucket name, and since bucket names can't be repeated across regions, you necessarily have two different bucket names, and therefore necessarily your checksums are different and don't work if you're trying to set that up. So maybe this is a good feature for that. I think the description describes this as something to make it more compatible with non-Amazon S3 backends, so S3 compatible backends, things like what's it called? The self-hosted S3 that's popular on-prem.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of it either.
Cool. And well, that's the end of my announcements. Matt, anything stand out for you this week?
Nothing's coming to the top of my head, but let me go back and I'll look at my notes if while anyone else might have some things to bring up.
Yeah, Minos or something. It's not just Mini, right, Matt? It's like Minio. That's what it is. Yeah, that's the self-hosted S3 alternative. Mr. Jenkins, do you have any other cool announcements?
No, none that I can think of right off the top of my head. Those were the ones that were kind of, I didn't even contribute to the hay discussion because I was appreciating all the other thoughts that everybody was given. But yeah, those were the main ones that I was thinking about. I'm faced with what do I want to say, like considering costs on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. So those types of discussions are always interesting to me.
Is this part of one of your consulting engagements where you're helping with that?
Yeah, just considering like how to keep costs down and cut back on anything cloud, basically.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if no other announcements right now, then why don't we jump into Q&A?
I gave a very quick one that they announced that you can now enable Systems Manager by default on the organization level, which I thought is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That one I saw.
That'll make it easier to enforce policies at an org level.
Yeah.
Nice. Wonder what that means when somebody deploys a rogue EC2 instance. They're like, why does this have SSM on it?
At least everyone can connect to it then and figure out why it's there.
Yeah. Multi-VPC ENI attachments. Interesting. So you could have your like EKS nodes living in two VPCs. That's really interesting. I wonder if that works. So you could actually use a shared VPC and also a dedicated VPC per account, and then your nodes can have certain networks they communicate on.
Yeah, and turn themselves into a target for permission escalation. It's perfect.
Into the shared.
I saw another one, another announcement like a little over, I think it was probably before last week, but I don't know if we ever mentioned it. I just double clicked. I mean, I just posted the link there, but they have created a whole host of CloudWatch templates for best practices for setting up alarms across like 1 million different services, like in the
Beautiful.
in the AWS ecosystem. I think there's another.
Is there a Git repo with those?
Yeah. Is it this one? There's definitely a repo because I looked at it. And it was what I thought was interesting though is that when you go to that thing, it actually shows you you can create the code in CloudFormation, CLI, or Terraform.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
You know what we did for remember what we did for all the conformance packs, Matt? So we can just generate all those automatically. I think that'd be perfect to just have a module that can translate that. That's so cool.
Yeah,
But,
so
and even the way they write it here looks very similar to how conformance packs are represented on the web, but where are...
I think you actually have to go into that. If you go to that link that I posted, there's like a link in the console, and then in the console it actually shows you the keep going where it says right there, and then you go to alarm in the metrics thing. You go to alarm recommendations, and then it will actually show you when you go to create it. It will give you the IAC basically to create that recommended alarm, which was pretty cool. So I guess we'd have to do this like one time, like to export all these things.
Yeah.
Although these are just CloudWatch alarms, so we can, what we did with compliance, when the documentation was written just like that, we scraped, we wrote a web scraper to scrape the documentation and actually like pull out all those parameters.
Yeah.
And create them like into a catalog, basically. That's how we originally did it. That's the problem with AWS having 27 different GitHub organizations. Good luck finding anything.
That's actually a good question. I'll open this up. One of the things we're considering at Cloud Posse is how to improve discoverability. And when you start having hundreds, thousands of repositories, that's difficult. GitHub is pretty adamant about not supporting hierarchical repo structures, the way GitLab and I believe Bitbucket does support, even though it's been requested, since almost inception. One of the patterns that's coming a lot more common is like you have AWS IA as a GitHub organization. Then they have AWS SAM Terraform templates, and they have controllers, and they have actions. So they have all of these different organizations. Today I saw somebody was sharing Zalando Incubator, another pattern, having a separate org for all, if you have a lot of skunkwork projects that, not necessarily going to receive long-term support, stash them there. What's everyone else's thoughts on this? Do you work for an organization that does this? Do you have any opinion? Does this turn you off, or, do you like it? Or no opinion?
Sorry, are you referring to the organization name, like how they're doing that?
Yeah, what they're doing up here.
Yeah, on my team, we were thinking about doing that as well. We saw, I think you've highlighted it multiple times from AWS. And it seems like a pretty cool way to kind of separate things, because that's been one frustration I've had with GitHub. You could use GitHub topics to do it, but doing it at an org level seems nice. The one caveat is, how do you discover all the different orgs that your org has? So I think there's some trade-offs with it, but the approach that we're thinking about taking was creating a separate org, like for Helm charts that we use, just having like a Helm chart org, and then dumping all our Helm charts in there, and then going back to our main org and just having like a link out to all our different orgs and what they're used for. So this way, if people create new repos, they create in the correct section. The one caveat I ran into recently is I started playing around with the idea of the migration is GHCR. If you like move stuff around, GHCR tends to break. So
GHCR,
the GitHub Container Registry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've run some weirdness when I've like renamed repos or moved things around. It just seems to just break entirely. So I haven't gotten to the bottom of the proper way to move things around, but personally, I'm a huge fan. I just like for example, in the AWS, I don't know if they have like a parent page that says,
Oh, so that's what I was going here. I was going to see, and this is what you do, but they do nothing.
so there's also, I think, like a GitHub profile page.
Yeah, so I think
one
this
right
is
here.
what they
Yeah.
should do, is
Yeah.
that when you go there, it would show go here, go here, go here, and then you then each one of those organizations has their own org page that describes the organization.
Yeah, I think the other thing is you could also have like, depending on the size of your team and company, if you were to take this multi-org approach, you could easily have org admins.
Yeah.
Versus
Self-contained
yeah.
teams and so forth.
And then, yeah, I feel like that would help reduce friction on onboarding and just permissions management, stuff like that. But yeah.
Also, I was wondering if like the free orgs are good enough for a lot of the things one want to do, but then it looks like, you know, stuff that I've just taken for granted forever. Like code owners, does that mean you don't have code owner support in a free team, even for open source repositories? That was not
I think that's correct. Yeah, for me, the enterprise pricing is like, this is probably like the best deal out of everything that we pay for, especially for the amount of time that I'm in GitHub for 19 bucks a user.
Are you using enterprise?
Yeah, we're on enterprise, and it's, yeah, I feel like the price point is really solid for everything that we're getting. And obviously we're using a lot of our repos are public, similar to you folks. So we don't face a lot of the charges that you might incur if everything is private. So I can't speak to the real enterprise burn there. But I imagine if you have to do everything private, you might be using self-hosted runners, things like that, which should also help bring down the costs.
All right, another question then for everybody. So like one of the challenges with as an open source company is working with contributors and the tooling around that. Google's obviously good at this, and they built a lot of their automation tools around bots that can do approvals, bots that do merges, bots that do everything. So you don't need to add users to your organization itself. And Cloud Posse, we've just been footing the bill, adding contributors to our GitHub organization with restricted permissions. And hey, it's easy. But then we got to pay for that. Either way, we got to pay. We got to pay for the engineering to build the tooling to do those things, which is, I guess, a one-off cost, and hopefully it goes down over time, or we pay the recurring seat cost. What's keeping me away from going to enterprise for sure is, well, our team size, you know, doubles or triples in size because of contributor seats that I don't want to pay that price on. What is the best tooling out there? Is there some good tooling that I should be looking at that isn't homegrown the way, like Google created all their homegrown stuff? Great, power to them. That's what they should do. I'd prefer to see if like what off the shelf stuff exists for managing open source without adding people.
Have you folks more recently in the past year, as I've done like more open source contributions, I've started seeing what the process is. Like if you want to contribute against Grafana Helm chart, they've got their own process, or like the Grafana like binaries, whatever, or Argo CD, whatever it is. There's a lot of different tools that people are using. I'm not a contributor in their org. I just make my PR for my public repo, and I do a fork or whatever, and then PR back in. And it's been really insightful to see all the different tool chains that people are using and kind of automation. And it might take like a day or two to make a contribution to each of those repos, or just do a PR, and you'll see like all the automation that gets kicked off and how they're managing it. And it's been really cool to see all the different tools. I can't tell you which tool stack to use. Everyone's got their own opinion. Some of them keep it up to date. Some of them are really far behind. And that might be an area to make a quick contribution, especially on some of the Grafana Helm chart stuff that I've seen. But
is that where you've been making your contributions lately, and you like the process?
Yeah. So we've been doing it because we use like Prometheus stack, or we use like Argo CD, and we find that those upstream Helm charts are usually behind. And so a lot of the contributions have been like, hey, this new release dropped. Let's just, you know, try to give back where we can. And so we make that PR in the upstream Helm chart to just get the newer version rolled out, whatever that might be.
And then
so
are they using slash commands to, yeah.
yeah, Argo CD in particular, they do, theirs is pretty cool. They maintain a few different release branches. So they have like one for 2. They probably have one for, so like the last, I think like the last minor, they include so like 2.7 and 2.8, and then now they have 2.9 coming out. And if I make a PR or you make a PR against their latest version, they'll merge it in, it'll get merged into main, and then they have you do additional PRs where they'll cherry pick those changes back into those old release branches. So they keep a couple of old release trains, like 2 versions, I think. And then they do like a slash command. I think it's actually a tool from Google that they're using.
Hmm.
And then there's time, yeah, that's it. The GCP cherry pick bot. And for some reason, it doesn't always work. So in my case, it did not work. I don't know why, but it might have been some merge conflicts that couldn't be auto-resolved. So then I have to do manual PRs against each one. And then, for example, I think on Argo CD, all the tests run by default. Has been my experience. On Grafana, they've got like some approval process before the CI and everything runs.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the criteria is there, but it might be. I assume it's an extra protection on their end.
Yeah. And yeah, so this was on, I was talking about for Google, 56,000 commits so far have just gone into their test infra.
Another thing you may want to, like, another thing I was considering on the enterprise, and I don't know if it violates any terms of service, but the GitHub Terraform provider is pretty solid. So you could probably add people in and pull them out pretty easily. So we're actually managing, so we use the GitHub Enterprise, and we have the Terraform provider managing all the users and everything in there. The only thing you have to do ahead of adding users is making sure you have available seats. And also, just a quick FYI, if you convert your team org into an enterprise, if you are using GitHub packages, or if there's like a special, your actions can read and write to the repository, that will be disabled at an org level, and they tell you nothing about it till you dig around on the docs. It just happens by default. There's no notice or warning, and so stuff will just break if you're using that feature. I can point you to it if you do that cutover. It's just a simple check.
With GitHub Enterprise, are you limited in the? Do they limit the number of child organizations you can create?
I think I asked your support about that. I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Deleting orgs is a little tricky. You can't really do that in the Terraform provider easily. So you have to like, it'll get removed from the Terraform state, but it actually won't delete the org. You have to actually go in and delete the org. So just keep that in mind if you're doing some automation there. Aside from, there's definitely, if you're not using the GitHub Terraform provider, there's definitely a lot of cool features and easy ways to like scale how you're managing your org in there. We don't have a public module yet. We've been still figuring out the patterns, but it's pretty solid to get the Terraform provider for GitHub.
Cool. What is this?
Vein of managing PRs or pull reviews, pull requests. I've tried Axelo. Basically, every time a pull request gets opened, it opens a channel in Slack. You can have a custom prefix so it doesn't clutter your channel view. But then, based on your code reviewers, it could bring in the right people, and as a number of automations that are I think pretty interesting and worth looking at if you're in this domain.
Yeah, I know I was really gung-ho about a similar strategy, like one channel per Jira issue or things like that. It was not universally popular here, at least. And we gave up on that. But
channel discovery is the hard part, I think, and pulling people and that kind of stuff.
Also, overload, like context switch overload, is really hard.
For sure.
when you have hundreds of repos and potentially you have, you know, some percentage of those constantly getting updated with pull requests, like trying to stay on top of
Yeah.
all those new channels is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think the automation helps reduce some of the management toil for this a little bit. But again, I haven't used it in anger, so I've only used it in kind of very, very small projects. So it's worth looking at see if it fits in a bigger context.
Thanks.
I've also seen this new tool that I think is really cool. It's a little mind blowing, kind of breaks the paradigm, but I don't know if you've seen graphite.dev.
No, what's that?
It's this tool that kind of sits on top of GitHub or GitHub in this case, to basically deal with the problem of like pull requests breaking, like, you know, merge queues and like all of that kind of stuff on top of each other. And you can easily switch contexts with what you're working on, independent of like branches and pull requests and all of those things, and it kind of manages it under the hood for you, that all of those things are happening. It's you'd have to go like take a look at like the demo to really grasp like how it works. It's hard to explain in one thing, but the only problem with it is it's like just as expensive as GitHub itself. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling so sassed out these days.
Yeah. But I'm just, for if you're in an enterprise, this might not be as bad, like, you know,
Yeah.
for what you're doing, but it's a pretty cool set of features. Like if I started a new, so like those stacks are basically like, stacks are kind of like something that you're applying things to, and then it makes sure that like one pull request doesn't break another pull request, no matter what order they're merged in, kind of thing. And it gates them and does all sorts of things for it, which is pretty cool.
So yeah, really helpful if you are doing PRs across repos to implement functionality.
Mm-hmm. And also just in a singular repo, like all the manual work of keeping up to date with the base branch and head and all that kind of thing, it's kind of like magically doing that underneath the hood for you.
All right, we got about 10 more minutes. Any other questions today we can get answered?
I do have a quick one. I heard someone mention the Prometheus stack. I was just curious what people's experiences are with self-hosting monitoring platform that is made up of that, you know, Prometheus Grafana stack, and whether it's something you'd recommend or not. I'm curious.
So I've been running it for a while now, and it offers a lot out of the box. They do give you paths to provision your own dashboards and basically add more to it. The only drawbacks I've had are occasionally get a bug, and so you basically, depending on how you're managing your infrastructure and your environments, you'll probably want to test cluster before you do updates. But the reality is you could also run a very old version for a very long time and not have to deal with updates at all. It just depends on how far behind you want to be on the upstream. But for the most part, me and my team, we're updating at least once a month, and it's been usually pretty smooth. We do a regression at least before we roll it out to our prod environment, but it's pretty rare. And a lot of times when stuff breaks, it's just Grafana, just literally a Grafana update. Can't log in anymore, or can't log in twice. It's my favorite. But it's been pretty consistent, and you just get a lot of dashboards out of the box. You don't have to build anything from scratch. There might be other solutions out there that do this, but I've used Prometheus for years now, so I'm a little biased towards that. And it seems like a lot of the tool chain and everything If you're deploying Argo CD, you're deploying literally anything that's popular, there's a good chance there's a service monitor, and that service monitor ties right into Prometheus stack. So just the ecosystem has basically standardized on using Prometheus and the Prometheus operator. So life should be easier if you stick to that, is my initial impression. You don't necessarily have to use Prometheus stack. You could also hand roll deploying Prometheus operator and all of that. But if you deploy with the Helm chart, the popular on Prometheus stack, you get Grafana, you get Alert Manager, and you get Prometheus. And then they also have some toggles and stuff for Thanos. So if you're running stuff at scale, that's an option too. We're not leveraging that yet.
I mean, if you want to have data for more than like a month, you're going to have to look into other solutions. And the other issue we would run into is, like, the whole reason you need it is, well, okay, to catch when things go wrong, but when things go wrong, to use it and look at it. And back in the day, this is like 4 years ago now on Kubernetes and using it, like, there were many times where, you know, the cluster was hosed and so was therefore Prometheus, and we couldn't figure out what was going on without dropping to shell and just doing what we had to do anyways with kubectl. So I kind of like the idea of trying to get that stuff off the server. Have you integrated that with Matt Calhoun was just explaining to me today kind of how even if you use the AWS managed Prometheus, you still need to run Prometheus on your cluster and then federate it with the managed offering. Matt, was that right?
It's like an external writer, basically.
Yeah.
Like you still have to run Kubernetes to do the scraping locally from the metric server, and then it will then like send it to the managed Kubernetes basically upstream.
Yeah, and that's a really good point on the resource utilization. Like if your cluster's hosed, you can't view your metrics. We ran into that issue in some of our load testing. We were able to hose it with some. I ran JMeter, took down my own cluster, and obviously non-prod environment. But after that, our attempt to protect ourselves is to run this on a dedicated node pool. So we've set up a dedicated node pool just for all the Prometheus, all of the what we call our control plane services, and that seems to be working so far. I imagine there will be a time after an upgrade or something where that backfires, but hopefully by then we've got some of that external federation set up, as you've just mentioned, the AWS offers. And then also Loki is another cool tool to look at. I personally like OpenSearch more, but Loki was pretty easy to deploy, and it seems like people are headed in that direction. So you may want to factor that in as you're deploying Prometheus stack, Loki and Prometheus. And those are also one more thing to add for what it's worth. Prometheus is pretty stable. Grafana, Prometheus, Loki are all like fast moving projects. So when you're using this stuff, just keep that in mind. It's a fast moving project. So you might be on version 10. I think they just recently, they're actively working on 10.2.1 for Grafana. And then in a month from now, you're gonna have like 10.3. And then if you might think it's a safe upgrade, and then everything kind of breaks. So so just keep that in mind. If you have Datadog or another hosted SaaS solution, that may not be a bad option either. I haven't deployed that in Kubernetes, of course.
That's good to know. I use Datadog currently, but anyone who's used them knows that their pricing quickly gets out of hand. Now, the question is like, is my engineering time and the time of my team to maintain a self-hosted monitoring stack, is that really cheaper? Who knows? But there's
DHH says so.
There's a big push to get that stack in my org, and so I'm just exploring it. I had a quick specific question about, I was looking at it and there's a couple of Helm charts, like one from Bitnami, there's one from the community. Do you know which specific one you use?
Yeah, I'm using the one from the community, and I could link that in the office hours channel. The only Bitnami Helm chart we're using right now, I think, is external DNS. So everything else, I like all the popular tool chain. So the one from Prometheus community is what I'm using.
Okay, good to know. And thanks for all the other tips. I'll probably have to listen to this recording again.
Oh, no worries.
Find it on YouTube. All right. Well, we have another 5 minutes if there's another quick question we can get to. Totally open.
I just had a quick question around is if there's anyone out there is using ALBs with Istio ingresses, and if you have been, what sort of issues have you come up with and how have you solved them? It's just an exploratory question.
Yeah, we are not doing it at Cloud Posse. Talking with
That's
one
cool.
customer
Thank
to
you.
get them off Istio back onto native Kubernetes networking and services.
What was the reasoning behind that? Really interested.
Well, I guess it depends on when you jumped on the rails with Istio, but they did about 3 years ago, and the upgrade paths haven't all been smooth. Plus, the core team that set it up isn't the core team that's there anymore and isn't really comfortable with how that works. So when things go wrong, they have trouble understanding all of that. We at Cloud Posse don't deploy service meshes as part of the solution because the same kind of customer that comes to us, I don't believe is the same kind of customer that has the internal operational readiness to handle that additional layer of abstraction on top of Kubernetes and the networking. And like, so I kind of feel like crawl, walk, run, and how far can you get with native networking before the mesh-like capabilities are a true requirement versus a nice to have. Some of the things that it offers, I mean, there's so many things you can do with the mesh that you can't do just with native networking, but the most common things is like MTLS between the services, or restricting who can talk to what. And now with pod security groups, you can just do that very easily to restrict which services can talk to which services. Also, Kubernetes EKS, if you're on AWS, which is what we specialize on, now supports network security policies. So that's another way to limit it. The sidecar pattern is so freaking easy to just have an NGINX sidecar there and then use Cert Manager for self-signed certs and use that, so you can ensure there's some level of end-to-end encryption. What you're losing is that some of the telemetry that you would get with Jaeger to see, flow patterns. What else are you using it for?
So we're going down the state ramp and feed ramp patterns. And one of the things that's been given to us is effectively encryption everywhere. The normal stuff that you're talking about with controls, ACLs, those sorts of things, you know, we can do with that with the existing stuff that's in there. But most of this is driven around encryption and controlling access to things, specifically data in transit. So that's really the main reason for looking at it.
So therefore,
I'm
it's
just
not
really
needed
interested.
necessarily. I mean, so therefore, using self-signed certs with Cert Manager, you can ensure that.
Yeah, I think I'm
Your
going to go back
services
and have
only
another good
listen
hard
to
look.
your services only listen to localhost, and the only thing that is exposed is the sidecar that exposes the TLS endpoint. What were you saying? I cut you off.
Oh no, I basically agree with you. I'm just trying to work out how do we even need to do this? Or is there other patterns I can explore to get there?
It hurts that you just don't get automatic encryption within a VPC on AWS yet to this day. There's one other thing you can sort of leverage for the checkbox purpose, at least. Are you on AWS? Is that what this is? Where you're operating?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So if you use any of the Nitro instances, all region, I believe traffic is automatically ensured to be TLS encrypted. But that doesn't. But the second you go over a VPC peering connection or something else, that promise is not there. And it doesn't
to know,
transfer
thank you.
to the RDS database, for example. But then RDS has TLS. So.
Yeah, and pod to pod is not encrypted by that inside the cluster itself. That's only when it leaves, when it goes node to node.
Node to node, true. Yeah.
Yeah, not pod to pod.
Intra node, then you're saying.
Yeah. Correct. Like if one service is talking to another service that is physically on the same node, that traffic is in plain text. And the argument there is if someone could introduce some sort of sniffing technology, they could then basically intercept PII, PHI, ... whatever the thing is that whichever standard we care about trying to protect against in this case.
I haven't heard that argument.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, it looks like we made it to the end of the hour here. I'm going to be mindful of everyone's calendar. Thank you so much for joining us today on Office Hours. We're going to have another session next week, same time, same place. You can find the recording of today's session in a few hours by going to youtube.com/cloudposse, where we'll post a recording of this session and also syndicate it to our podcast at podcast.cloudposse.com, so you can catch up on back episodes however you listen to podcasts. If you're curious about what we do here at Cloud Posse and if we can move the needle for you at your organization, go to cloudposse.com/quiz, answer a few quick questions, and we'll see if we can help you out. Other than that, newsletter.cloudposse.com. We have a weekly newsletter, all these cool links and things we come across. We try to share there as often as we can. And connect with me on LinkedIn. Go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman, and I'll connect with you. Take care all. See you.